Oh,
Pajot. Hi, everybody. Pajot, as you all just heard. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to wait for everybody to start coming in, but I want to introduce my guest, Anna Pajot. And one of the reasons that I was really passionate about having her on, because I don't know how long ago, it was like over a year ago that I had Stacy Hollebeck.
Haluka.
Haluka, that's right, on my show, who I actually do know. And she came on to talk about aromatherapy. And I saw an interview that she did with Anna. And I wanted her to come on and talk about her passion, which is animals and the health and the well-being of animals. And as you all know, I'm very passionate about that. So thank you so much, Anna, for being here. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to sharing my knowledge.
Do you want to tell everybody a little about yourself and what you do?
Okay, so I became an aromatherapist, started focusing on working with humans and stuff. And I started out because of my own son at the time, had a lot of different issues. He's allergic to traditional medicine, so had to figure out natural alternatives. And so I became an aromatherapist. And as I was working, I kind of connected with a farm that's a rescue farm. And I was teaching classes for humans, but of course, because we were at a farm, everybody's like, well, can I use this with my animals? So I got really passionate about working with the animals and got my certification to be an animal aromatherapist for animals. And I spent probably 2 years at the farm and really just dug in, worked with all sorts of different animals, from bunny rabbits and chickens and ducks and all the way up to the horses and stuff. So I really enjoy it.
For me, that's an important subject, and especially as we go into the holiday season and everybody's getting ready for the holiday season, and we're doing and moving and, getting ready. And fortunately, this year we're not doing as much of that as we usually do, but there's still people that are doing that to some level. But as we were talking before we went live about being really like paying attention to what it is that you're putting out into the air, what you're giving your animals. And these things are really important because I think sometimes underestimate their systems aren't like our systems. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because sometimes we can overlook that.
Absolutely. And it's definitely something that's come up a lot more this year, just because everybody's at home more. So people, you're burning a candle that's got, even if it's not an essential oil candle, a candle that has a lot of fragrance in it. And that is something that your animals aren't used to. Going back to the pets that are in your households all the time versus the farm animals I worked with a lot. Your pets aren't used to you being at home, and they aren't used to you having a candle or your diffuser or whatever running all the time. So we definitely started exposing our animals a lot more. And now that we're getting into the holiday season, those fragrances that we may be using, like cinnamon and stuff like that, those can be really harsh on our animal system. So it's important to think about that as we're burning our candles or having our diffusers running. So you want to make sure that you're being mindful, following a lot of the safety protocols that go along, especially if you're using essential oils. You want to make sure
that. So talk to people a little bit about that, because it's been a long time since Stacy's been on the show, and that was the main subject that we had. And people still have their diffusers and they're running them 24/7, or they're putting in a combination of different things. And not only is that, or can that be detrimental to your animal, but it also affects your body as a human being as well.
Absolutely. So when we're running a diffuser, you really want to go with a rule of thumb of doing it for 15 minutes to 30 minutes maximum on, and then turn it off for at least an hour. Because if you aren't smelling it anymore, then you're not getting any benefits from it. So if you add more essential oil so you can smell it again, you're really overloading your system. And then if you have animals in the house, you're really overloading their system, because their sense of smell, no matter what type of animal it is, their sense of smell is going to be up to 6 million times more sensitive than ours. And that's something I think a lot of people forget about.
That is very important. And that goes with anything, like you said, the candles, the diffusers, even the sprays that you have in your house, or the things that you put in your bathroom or wherever that have the essential oils in a bottle, and you have the sticks. All these things are emitting these smells. Also,
Right. The aromatics are going up into the
yeah.
air. So
Also, they're also medicines as well. A lot of these things are the type of essential oils we use are medicine as well, and I think we underestimate that.
yeah, people definitely underestimate that you can use essential oils as a medicine. Obviously, that's not something that can be promoted because of
Mhm.
FDA guidelines and stuff,
Exactly.
but it is something that they have done studies to see
Mhm.
certain essential oils will do certain things. So it's important to realize that. And that was when I was working
Mhm.
this year, obviously, with everything that's happened. I haven't done a lot of hands-on with animals, but
Mhm.
when I was using it in a way that I was assisting the animal with maybe an injury or muscle soreness or something like that. So, but I also was working with a vet to make sure that the vet knew what I was doing. So I want to make sure that people understand that you, just like with humans, if you are going to use an essential oil, you need to make sure you disclose that to the medical professionals that you're working with.
That's very important. I agree with that. What are some of the tips that you can give people as we're going through this holiday season about how to keep your animals safe, and things that you can do that would be beneficial for them?
Definitely, if you're going to be using candles or whatever, just
Mhm.
don't keep it going all the time. If you want to run your diffuser, I know around this time, a lot of people may want to do something so their house smells like a Christmas tree if they don't want to
Mhm.
have a real Christmas tree. So, maybe turn your diffuser on before you sit down to have dinner, but turn it off when you sit down for dinner because it doesn't need to be running all the time.
Mhm.
And the other thing that you can do, especially if you're wanting to use something like a diffuser, consider using aromatherapy jewelry
Mhm.
or the aroma stone, which is something that not a lot of people know about, is something that um, rather than emitting it out into the room in a big way like diffusers do because they kind of push like a lot of
Yeah.
them are use water, so they push
Mhm.
that out into the room. An aroma stone actually you put the oil on that and it'll warm it. So it'll like if you have it on your desk while you're working,
Mhm.
it's a much gentler way to use it. So that would be something, especially for people that are working from home or home more often.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more of us doing that these days. That will hopefully end soon. What are some of
Yeah.
the essential oils that should not be used around an animal? Are there specific ones? I was more like, I know you could go through the whole list, but the common ones that people would, I know the list is long. But the common ones that people would use in their diffuser that would not be good for your animal.
I think the most common one is gonna be tea tree, and I actually
Mhm.
just saw it again recently that there's a story floating around that a dog became, like, forgetful of who his owner was and stuff like that after a diffuser had been running for a long time,
Mhm.
and they were talking about it being tea tree toxicity, which this is one of those stories, kind of like using essential oils with a cat, which we can go into in a second. Um, that's a hard one because yes, you can cause your animals toxicity, but
Mhm.
a lot of times it's going to be if you're putting it on the animal that they're going to have that severe of a reaction. And
Mhm.
tea tree is one of those oils that I've not personally experienced it because I've been very careful because I've heard stories.
Mhm.
But tea tree is one of those oils that some dogs have had seizures when they've had it put
Wow.
on maybe a cut or something.
Mhm.
But other animals have been just fine. So I
Mhm.
think that's an important thing for, especially if you're new to using essential
Yeah.
oils, is that you can't just go full board into it and listen to everything you read. You
Mhm.
really, really, really need to take it slowly,
Mhm.
work with one because an oil that's toxic to one dog may not be toxic
Right.
to another. But there is definitely some oils that, like wintergreen, I won't even use it on me. But that's one oil that I won't touch with animals and stuff. And then there's some other ones that are much more harsh that I won't use with animals at all.
But tea tree oil is a pretty common. People
Right.
in general will have that in their house for many different things.
Right.
So that's
that's why I figured that's an important one to mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important. And what's interesting about that is an animal of any sort still has a system that can react differently, just like we would react differently to medicine. So that's why that's really important. And
Exactly.
I don't know, unless you're really trained, that you should be putting any kind of essential oil on any skin without knowing how to do it correctly. Because to put essential oil on any skin, including the human skin, without having the carriers and taking the precautions can cause a lot of illness for anybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And when I was working at the farm and stuff with the smaller animals, and even with my own dogs at home, I generally did not use essential oils. I would use any sort of other aromatic botanical, whether it was a hydrosol, whether it was, even just infusing something into an oil that I would then use, but I wouldn't use an essential oil. There was some instances where there was certain issues that we had at the farm that an infection was happening or something like that. And then I would use an essential oil, but usually it was like less than a 1% dilution. And that was able to kind of help the animal get over what they were doing, as well as adjusting their diet and stuff. And I think that's another thing that people forget. They're like, ooh, an essential oil is going to cure everything. And it's like, no, this is one part of a much bigger picture. You need to do a lot more than use an essential oil.
Okay, if I had a bell behind me, I'd be ringing it right now. People don't understand that the food that you put into your body will affect your body. And the food that you put into an animal's body will do the same thing. So when they're having ailments, you have to go to, like you would as a human being, you would say, what is going wrong here and where do I start? A lot of times you start at food. Food is a big culprit in causing a lot of illnesses. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, with animals, one of the things that we're seeing a lot more is that dogs, I don't work with a lot of cats just because I'm not so much a cat person, but I know especially with dogs, because of going to cheaper bagged food, a lot of dogs are developing allergies. And so a lot of vets are having to treat them with various different medications and stuff like that, where if you if you need to use a bagged food, I'm not one of those people that's ever going to say, oh, you need to go all raw, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. But if you can incorporate some of those other things that can help them, like a banana is okay for your dog to eat because it can support their system. But, you don't want to give them just banana. So it's just like with humans, you need to look at the whole picture of what they're getting, what they're eating, what can you do to support their system. So really just trying to slow down, which is my thing all the time. I'm always trying to tell people, slow down and pay attention to what's going on around you. Quit trying to keep up with the time matrix because it's crazy.
Yeah, when you never will keep up with it. So why try?
Exactly.
You're behind time. You're not going to be in front of time. Even though you try, you're not going to be.
Exactly.
I was at the vet yesterday and I was overhearing this woman who brought her dog in and they giving a checkup or whatever. And she was saying that they're finding more and more animals are coming into the vet overweight because people are home and they're not out giving them the walks that they normally get, or they're feeding them just like people at home are eating too much. They're feeding their dogs too much or their cats too much. So this is something to be really mindful of as well, because animals can't be healthy if they're putting, well, none of us are healthy if we're putting on a lot of weight. But
Yeah.
animals need to have that balance in life, or they're going to
Hmm.
have the balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They definitely need the balance. And the other thing with animals is they can't tell us what's
Yeah.
going on.
Hmm.
So, that's one of the things is that when you're working with an animal, if you're wanting to add any sort of complementary therapy,
Hmm.
you can't do it one day and expect to see something happen. It's something that you have to learn their personality. And hopefully, if they're your pet, you understand their personality. But if you're adding a complementary therapy, you have to give it time. You have to give it a week or two or three or four and keep doing the same thing
Hmm.
over and over rather than, oh, I'm going to try this for 2 days. Oh, that doesn't seem to be working. Okay, I'm going to move on to this, or I'm going to add this, or I'm going to do that. And their mind is going to get that way, all chaotic. And
Hmm.
I don't understand what you're doing to me and stuff like that. So you have to give things whatever it is you're trying to do, or even just going back to just our everyday living. If you're diffusing every day, you really need to start paying attention to, is my dog all of a sudden acting more lethargic? I've been diffusing this blend for the last week and Fido doesn't seem to be jumping up as quickly.
Hmm.
Maybe I need to think about this and maybe I need to change up the blend that I'm using.
And that's really important for anything new that you do. Like if you're just starting to use a diffuser, or if you just now are, okay, because of the holidays, I'm using a candle more, or whatever changes you make in your life, you also have to pay attention to how that's affecting your animal.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And it's just one of those things that we don't always think about it because we're like, oh, they're there and I anticipate them being there all the time. But it's like, wait, what am I doing that's affecting them?
Right.
Because if I'm diffusing this, I feel great, but do
Right.
they still feel great? So,
Exactly. And for me, I'm a big one on the food. I had a dog that I absolutely adored. She was a boxer. She was only 3 years old. And, I was into nutrition and health and aromatherapies and all these things. That was my life. I was living that way, exercising, taking care of your body, what you put in your body counts, all of that. And I was totally ignoring my dog, totally
mhm.
ignoring my dog, until my dog ended up getting cancer. And that was the biggest wake up call for me, to really understand, if you live on Wheaties and Captain Crunch and, I name whatever cereals that are out there, you're
Yeah,
not going to feel good in a couple days. So why do
right.
we think that we're going to do that to our animals? Because that's what's pretty much in the dog food that especially the dry food that you're feeding your animal. If you're not aware of what's actually in there and the
Yeah.
percentage, they're not getting the nutrients that they need.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was when I was working at the farm,
Hmm.
there was a goat that they had taken in. It was wandering on the side of the road. Nobody claimed it. So it came to live at the farm as a rescue.
Hmm.
And they had vets come out. The goat never could gain weight. She always would go through cycles of getting sick and having issues and no matter what they tried, they couldn't figure out what was going on.
Hmm.
And even when I worked with her, um, she still had issues, but we were able to get her to have them less often by
Hmm.
just kind of working with her. And I'd go in and I'd brush her, and I used a hydrosol blend that I would use to brush her because her coat was really unhealthy and stuff like that. And but spending time with her and
Yeah.
just really getting to understand her personality and stuff. And then I found a recipe that was a goat cookie that I would make and take to her a couple times a week and stuff like that. And like I say, she still had issues
Hmm.
and she still wasn't the healthiest goat. And
Hmm.
unfortunately she didn't live for very long, but she had a better quality because we were able to kind of work on the whole
Hmm.
system, even though we never could identify what actually was wrong with her.
So you used a term a couple times that I'm not sure that everybody knows what that is. What is a hydrosol?
So a hydrosol, and it's one of those sticky terms depending on which aromatherapist you talk to. A hydrosol is actually the water that is created during distillation. And some people call it a byproduct of an essential oil distillation. And some people are like, no, this is the product that we're creating. So there's definitely a few companies out there that will distill plant material specifically for the hydrosol. So it's a water-based product that comes out of distilling plant material. And it's because it doesn't have the essential oil in it, those two separate out when it's being distilled. And so the oil will float on the top, and you'll have a little bit of the essential oils particles inside the water, but it's much gentler because the more intense concentration chemical constituents are going to be floating on the top in the essential oil, which is what everybody turns to.
And that's why you described that perfectly. And it was important in the way you described it, because what you're saying is essential oils are very condensed and the hydrosols are not. And that's why it's a much easier product to use on your animals versus in using essential oil. So I still think though you need to be careful with what you use in a hydrosol as well, because you can get a hydrosol in almost anything that's created.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different hydrosols out there. And there's some products that you can only get the hydrosol just because they don't create, certain plants don't have enough oil in them to create an essential oil. So, but even with a hydrosol, there's definitely certain hydrosols. So going back to our tea tree, which you definitely need to be very cautious with, but a tea tree hydrosol might be able to get used, whereas a tea tree essential oil, I would recommend definitely not using at all.
I still would be really careful with a tea tree, even if you use the hydrosol, because it's still got particles in it, and energy is energy. And the hydrosol is just a more diluted energy potion or energy solution. So it still has that energy. So I would definitely always test it on your animal before you did anything, for sure. Any changes you make, you should test and make sure it's safe first.
And one of the things that you can do that's so easy is, depending on your level of using things, people will either have like little strips of paper that you could use just to put your whatever fragrance item you want to use, just put that on there, and don't even hold it close to your animal's face. Hold it, at least arm's length away, and see what they do, see how they react. And then you can see if they're gonna, you can kind of tell, as long as you know their body language, you can tell if that's going to be something that they're going to enjoy when you're diffusing it because you enjoy it. You can tell if they're going to enjoy it too by giving them the opportunity to sit first.
I love that. That's a form of muscle testing on your animal. Oh no, I lost you. Are you coming back?
I'm back. I hear you.
Oh, good. Yep. Okay. That's a form of muscle testing, because animals are way more sensitive than what we even understand that they are. So they know what's right or wrong or good or bad way before, and you could tell that in their body language. So that is a beautiful tip for people to use. I love that.
Yeah, I will precaution people, because that is one of the ways that I see a lot of people that focus on animal aromatherapy is kind of the muscle testing, which in some ways is great. But the way that I want to caution people is that animals, if they're wild, know what plants are good and bad for them. Animals that are domesticated aren't always going to know that, because we've taken that learning away from them.
We did.
So you have to understand that, yes, they may be very curious about every single essential oil that you're working with, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they need whatever it is they're turning towards. So you just have to be very mindful of, yes, let them smell it. Yes, let them interact with it. Don't let them lick it or anything like that, because that would be horrible. But
Yeah.
but let them interact with it. But also be mindful of the fact that they don't necessarily, and we'll just use an extreme one, wintergreen. They
Mhm.
don't know that wintergreen could be toxic to them, but they may be very curious about it because it's not a scent that they're used to smelling.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you know, let them go ahead. Not that I would use wintergreen, but I'm using that as an extreme case.
Yes.
But, they may be curious about whatever it is, but don't always interpret, oh, they're turning towards it. They're coming towards me. They're whatever. Like I said, use it a few times
Mhm.
and realize that they're more curious about it just because they haven't interacted with that scent
Mhm.
like a wild wolf would
Right.
or whatever. So that's just one of the things that I've seen a lot more
Mhm.
lately is, oh,
Mhm.
well, my dog's curious about it, and so they must need to have it. Kind of like people say with humans, oh, I like that or I don't like that, whatever the newest theory is. So I must need that. And that's not always the case.
I love that. That is a very good point because animals, especially domestic animals, they're always wanting to know what we're doing. So they're always going to be in our business, right? So that is a very
Exactly.
good point because they aren't out in nature having to pick and choose what is actually safe and not safe for them. We're doing that for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And to remember to watch everything. Don't ever do anything for your animal and just adopt that right away that's new. You need to, hi Denise, hi Marcia. You guys need to do it in a slower way. Pay
Yeah,
attention and know your animal for sure. And
absolutely.
don't introduce too many things at one time. That
Yeah.
would be
Yeah,
another.
that's another thing that I saw a video a while ago that somebody had like 15 bottles of essential oil and they're like, "Well, if my dog walks towards that one, they need that." And I'm like, um how does your dog know from 15 cents, especially with how intense their olfactory system is, that they need that specific one when you've got 15? Pretty sure they just turned to that one because it was the easiest one to go to.
The closest one.
Hmm.
So we were talking earlier about people use essential oils for things that are wrong with their animals when there's other things that they can do before they would use an essential oil. What would be some of those things that you would suggest for people?
One of the ones that I hear a lot is people will want to make a spray because their animal smells.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, one, animals are supposed to smell. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's definitely times that their skin is telling us something's wrong with them, so that's why they smell. So you need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, dogs especially have an odor, and I can understand people wanting to cover that up
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it can be intense. But there's other things that you can do, like you could turn to like making an arrowroot powder and
Mm-hmm.
maybe adding some dried flowers, like if you wanted lavender or calendula or something like that. Take the dried flower, powder it up all together, and use that, and it's going to be much gentler on their system and on you because you're not having to pay for an essential oil.
Yeah. Conjugula, I can't say it now. That's a really good one for skin, for that's a good one for skin issues, that one. It's very calming and cooling and yeah, that's
Yeah.
very.
And it could be one of those things that maybe your dog's in the beginning stages of developing something like yeast or whatever. Make sure
Mhm.
you take them to the vet. I want to always, I don't want people to think, "Oh, well, this person said do this." No, you want to take them and make sure that there's nothing more serious going on with them. But
Mhm.
if they are developing some sort of a skin issue and you catch it at the beginning and use a powdered type thing, maybe you can ease their itching or whatever
Mhm.
before it gets into something much worse. And you don't hurt them with an essential oil because, oh, they've got this and I'm going to use an essential oil and make it 10 times worse.
Well, I think the main thing too that I wanted to bring out is that an animal is not like a person. and their system is not like a human being system. So you have to be really aware of, what is going to work for you may not work for your animal or may be detrimental to your animal. That's something that we have to really be aware of, especially when we have like poinsettias up or Christmas trees up. We have ornaments up. We have all these things that are new to an animal in our home that they're going to be, like you said before, they're curious. They're going to be curious about it. So we have to be aware of those things.
Yeah. And I can talk a little bit about the systems just to kind of give everybody a little bit of an overview. I mean, it's going to be very, I hate to use the word dumbed down, but very dumbed down so that people are like, oh, okay. So if you have, let's say, rabbits or guinea pigs in your house, and you're wanting to use different holistic methods with them, and we actually used to have a rabbit. So I never used an essential oil on him. I would never even consider that. The way that I kept my rabbit healthy was my herb garden, and he got leaves to eat every day. I would give him some parsley and some chives and whatever, and let him eat that. And that's how he stayed healthy and had a healthy coat. And it's important with those smaller animals like that have a much faster metabolism. So even if you're going to be using an essential oil or diffusing in your house, they're going to be processing that all through their system a lot faster. So it's going to affect us slower, but it's going to affect them in a much quicker way just because it's processing through their body fast. I mentioned cats, and cats is a very controversial subject within animal aromatherapy because cats lack an enzyme that most of us humans and animals have for processing toxins. It's a liver enzyme, and it's a big long, it starts with a G. I have it typed up in a blog post I wrote, but I can never say it. But it's a liver enzyme so that they can process toxins, and they actually lack that. So we don't know for sure how they can handle different toxins that we may be introducing to them when it comes to essential oils or hydrosols or anything. So with them, I would definitely go with maybe a powdered herb type remedy or something like that before I would even adopt a hydrosol. But a hydrosol definitely before I would ever even consider touching an essential oil with a cat.
Good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then when you get into the larger animals like donkeys and horses and stuff like that, don't think that just because they weigh over 100 pounds or hundreds of pounds that you can use twice as much essential oil, because that's not true. You still would use like what you would use for yourself. If you're using a essential oil blend that's a 1% dilution for a skin issue on yourself, you would also want to use that for a horse because of the way that their bodies process it and the fact that their olfactory system is much different, they have more membranes and stuff than we do. And if you think of a horse's nose, they get a lot more in than we do.
They do.
So, it's definitely one of those things that you need to think about when, just depending on the size of animal that you're working with. You don't need more essential oil.
And even with people, they put on tea tree oil like it's water. It blows my mind when I see people lather on tea tree oil because they use it as like an alcohol thing, a disinfectant, and it's not. It's very potent stuff. I remember having a conversation with my son years ago, and he just lambasted me about tea tree oil because I still think tea tree oil has its place.
Absolutely.
But to not use it. So I guess what I'm saying is that he was like, don't ever have it in your house for a reason. He said, don't ever have it in your house. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it's the balance. It's having the wisdom to know how to use it and using something in balance and not saying, well, it looks innocent in the little bottle. It looks innocent because it's a liquid. You can smell it and it's not going to kill you right away. So therefore, it's got to be okay. But through the group that you work with that a lot of people suffer from reactions, and animals can have the same thing to a lot of essential oils. And that's a very serious thing.
And that'll be an important thing to just kind of mention really quick is the number of people that, so the group that she mentioned is called the Unspoken Truth of Essential Oils, and we focus on the safety of essential oils, and we work to educate people that have had injuries because of using essential oils. And every once in a while people ask about animals, so that's part of why I'm there. But one of the things that, especially in the more recent years, that we've seen is there's a lot more people that have developed sensitivities to lavender, because lavender is so popular and so like everybody uses it and everybody wants it. And so now there's a lot of people that either they'll smell it and they'll instantly get a headache, or it'll get used on them and they'll instantly get a rash. And that's a sensitivity. So, that's something that people need to realize is that, and I think that that same sort of thing has happened with tea tree. And I'm very concerned that now that aromatherapy for animals is growing in popularity, we're going to start seeing that happen with animals.
Absolutely.
Where they're going to be much more sensitive.
So you talked about some of the symptoms, and maybe go a little more into symptoms to look for if you're having a reaction. But what kind of symptoms would you look for in your animal other than if they're obviously having a reaction? What would be some of the things they would look for in an animal?
So with an animal, things like salivating, panting, pacing when they don't normally pace, or laying still a lot when they don't normally lay still a lot. So any sort of abnormal behavior to what their normal is, which is why it's so important to spend time and know your animals.
Yeah.
Just how they are in general. But some of the more common ones are definitely salivating or panting, and then the more extreme ones are going to be having a seizure or something like that. Licking is another one. If they start licking a lot, licking just the air in general, or licking a body part or something. And especially if you've applied something, if they start licking like crazy, use something like coconut oil or olive oil or something like that and try to get it off as quick as you can. And use an oil, not soap, because that's going to absorb whatever it is, especially if it's got like an essential oil or a hydrosol where it's got some of those particles in it.
And I want to say that one more time, because people don't understand that if you use a pure essential oil, that's very harmful to not only animals, but to people too. And that it needs to have a carrier oil to be able to dissipate it and help absorb it without it being toxic or cause rashes or burns or whatever to your body. Very important to not slap an essential oil right on a skin of anything, except maybe an apple or an orange that you're not going to eat or whatever, but not on your skin of anything living, I should say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I have to say that because I can't believe how many people just use essential oils. Like frankincense, I love frankincense. And I love to smell frankincense. And I was talking to somebody one time and putting it all over. I'm like, what are you doing? Putting it all over the body without any carrier on it or with it. I mean, or it's.
And luckily, frankincense is one of those ones that it is a little bit more gentle, but you definitely have to dilute it in a carrier oil.
You do.
Have to dilute it. So.
If you're going to do, I mean, I use that one because it was just a conversation that I just had not too long ago, but people do that with whatever they have, whatever their scent is. And there are some that are really very potent and some that are not as potent. It's interesting. I didn't know lavender was starting to cause issues, although it makes sense because people's bodies are becoming, and animals too, are becoming toxic, or at least domestic animals' bodies are becoming toxic because of the diffusers that we use in our home.
Yeah, we're just overloading our systems is the problem. And we don't realize that we're just kind of overloading our systems.
Right.
And even if you're just burning a candle all the time, So
exactly. And something, it goes back to medicines that we use in pharmaceutical type medicines come from herbs. They're not just they're synthetic medicines that are made, but they're still the main derivative of an herb. And so we have to look at herbs as a medicine, and essential oils are the same way. And I think that people take it like it's, I don't know, aromatherapy. What to say. It's very serious. The other thing that is really important for people to remember too is that not all aromatherapists are created equal.
True. You definitely, I mean, if I added up all of the hours of training I have, I am probably close to 1,000 hours that I've done within coursework and, case studies. I had to get my certification with the animal aromatherapy. I think I had to do 30 or 40 case studies. I can't remember now. It's been a while, which was why I was grateful to have the farm, because the farm owner was amazing and we worked really well together. And she was like, have at it. So I worked with, and that it gave me such a diverse education because I was able to work with so many different types of animals.
I know for me, I did my aromatherapy courses and I loved it. And I was, it was fun. But what struck me at the end, and we're talking, I mean, a certification that was about this long. It wasn't when you're really going to be an expert at aromatherapy. When I walked out of that, I thought, there's no way I'm qualified to use this on anybody. There's just no way.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't to this day. I have enough knowledge to talk about it and say, from my experience, don't do this, or, this can happen or whatever. But I wouldn't even put the shingle aromatherapist over my name, because I don't have that knowledge to know what are the side effects. How is it going to react to somebody? What are the different ways that somebody can react to this? And what do you do if you have a reaction? I don't have all of that. You need to know. Case studies. I get very frustrated with this topic.
Yeah. And that was why I was so grateful that I was able to do so many case studies, because as difficult as it was to have to constantly, like, okay, which animal isn't feeling well today so that I can go work on them? I kind of hated to have to think in that who's sick today mind. But it also, like, going there and saying, okay, so who's not feeling well today? And having to sit there, and especially, I guess I keep going back to my farm experience, just because it forced me to learn about the different animals. Like my first case study was a horse. Then my second case study was a donkey. Then my third case study was a goat. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And even though my instructor had some of this stuff in the course, but there was certain things that weren't in there. And so I spent a lot of time digging into, like, different universities' websites and stuff like that, just so that I could learn even more, because I wanted to make sure that I was being safe with the animals and making sure that I was taking good care of them. And I learned that, like, goats can have, I'm going to confuse this, so nobody ever quote me on this, but, like, goats can have copper, but sheep can't have copper. And so when you have them maybe in the same pasture together, you have to be really careful about what type of feed you get, because if they, like, whichever one it is that can't have it, if you get a feed that has that in there, it'll kill them, because their bodies can't process it. So, I was forced to, through all of my case studies and stuff, to learn all of that. And I think that was really important for me to be able to feel more confident talking about, okay, I'm going to use this herb rather than I'm going to default to, oh, I'm an aromatherapist, so I need to use an essential oil. No, I'm going to use an aromatic plant, but not in an essential oil form.
Right. Denise said sheep cannot have copper. She has a
Okay,
farm.
I can.
She's creating her farm. Thank you, Denise.
I haven't been to the farm in like a year, so it's like because we moved. I moved across country, so I can't go there anymore.
That's funny. So, what are some of the tips that you can give people to, in general health, keep their dog and cats, their domestic animals, healthy? What are some of the things that are important for them to know?
One, don't just get a dog and think, okay, I'm just going to feed him and walk him and not pay attention to him. Other than that, oh, great, they're on my lap. Yay, I get to pet somebody. Really spend time with your pet or cat too. I mean, cats aren't, oh, it depends on the cat. Some cats are really loving. So, but really spend time to get, sorry, you were cutting out.
Some cats think they're dogs.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's really important just to get to know their personalities. I mean, I have a few friends that have birds, and I wouldn't recommend ever using essential oils or even burning candles necessarily around a bird, but you know, they all have unique personalities. So really it's important to get to know your pet from, you know, whether you get them as a puppy or whether you get a senior dog or cat and, you know, you want to take care of them at the end of their life. That's all fabulous, but you really just need to take a couple hours today and get on the floor with them and really get to know their personality. So I think that's one of the things as a pet lover that's always very important to me. And especially having worked at a rescue is these poor things, they just want love. That's all they want from us.
Yeah.
So just spend time and really love on them because that's all they want from us.
Right.
So I think that's really important. And then, as you mentioned several times, make sure you pay attention to their nutrition. There, you know, I'm guilty of using bagged dog food too, but I also like to, you know, throw in some other treats, but make sure that they're healthy treats. So make sure that they're things that are going to be healthy for your animal, whether it's a dog, a cat, a guinea pig, a, you know, rabbit. Like I say, my rabbit, he was a spoiled rotten rabbit and got all sorts of garden goodies. So, you know, just make sure that you're giving them those things that are going to be good and healthy for them as a treat, especially if you're using a commercial dog food, cat food, whatever. We all have busy lives and not everybody can sit there and cook for their animal all the time. But if you can incorporate some natural foods with your commercial foods. So in that regard, I would say that's important. And then make sure you're getting out and exercising. It's good for us and it's good for our animals.
Yes, absolutely. And water, making sure they have fresh water is very important.
Yeah. My dog always has fresh water. So.
Very, very important. I know a lot of people who don't change their water every day, and that's a cat or a dog. And it's just like you drinking, you know, a cup of water that you've had sitting for 3 days. You know, you need to have fresh water for them. And I mean, just common sense things. And making sure that their environment is safe. But they're fun to have. Our animals are a great joy to us, and they really fulfill our lives. And I think sometimes we take them for granted, and that's something we need to
do. Yeah, I think so too. I think, you know, it's one of those things that you get a pet because you want to have a companion. So don't forget that you were looking for that companionship. So make sure that you spend a little time loving on them every day.
Exactly.
And it'll be good. It'll be good for your own mind to set aside that half hour to play with the laser light with your cat, or I know some cats that'll go fetch a little fluff ball or whatever. You know, make sure you're getting safe toys, but spend, you know, set aside that half hour because I bet it would be great for you mentally, and your pet is going to love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they rely on us. We volunteer to be their caretaker, their guardians, and we need to take that seriously. I just got from my daughter's cat, who is kind of, it's so funny because Denise has a cat named Max, and my daughter has a cat named Max, and both of them think they're dogs. It's so funny. They both, we think it has something to do with the name Max. But anyway, I just bought Max a window sling so he could sleep while he's looking out the window. I'm like, I love this idea. It's such a great idea. Be up high, you can look outside. Perfect. Holds up to
I
35.
love seeing the houses. Sorry.
It holds up to 35 pounds.
Oh, nice. You could put a small dog in there.
I know, right? Both Maxes are big cats, so.
Oh yeah. I volunteered a long time ago at a rescue, and there was a cat there that had to have been, I don't even know. It was so overweight. It was so sad. And
Oh,
we ended up getting it to start losing weight, but he was so huge, but he was the sweetest cat too. But I couldn't tell you. He had to have been probably 30, 40 pounds. I don't know. He was huge.
wow. And that's an important thing for all pet owners, and all of us do. We do it sometimes with our kids even, is being, the more you feed them is not the more you love them. So you love them by making sure that they're eating healthy and that they're, doing things that are healthy for their bodies, just as well as you would do for yours, especially during this time period. I don't know how many people I've talked to is like, yeah, I've been eating crazy since COVID started and I'm not exercising at all. And, and we're feeling the stress of that, and our animals are feeling the stress of that as well. So make sure that they're getting the exercise that they need. All animals, like you said,
Yeah.
cats,
Well,
dogs.
and I think something else that kind of, because we have no clue when this is all going to end and when life may go back to, if life will go back to normal. But
Mhm.
one of the things that I think is important for people to think about too is if you've been at home and working from home and all of that kind of stuff, and you're going to have to go back to a job outside of the home,
Mhm.
think about your pet and try to maybe get them prepared for that
Yes.
too, because they've gotten used to you being home all the time.
Mhm.
So, and that was something I kind of reminded people about. I had done an interview a while ago, is that if you're going to be leaving the house again, maybe start doing smaller trips out
Mhm.
of the house so that your pets get used to you leaving again.
That's
So,
very important. That is a very good tip, because they do get used to us being home. And it's traumatic when
yeah.
they don't understand what's going on. And that's the thing is, I'm going to say it again, we're the caretakers to these sweet things that are in our life.
Mhm.
They trust us and they rely on us. So we need to
Yeah.
step up to the plate and make sure we're doing our job.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been leaving the house a little bit more, and I know that she's a senior dog now, but she's always known that because we've kennel trained her just
Mhm.
because it was safer for her,
Mhm.
and now she's like, because a week will go by and I don't leave the house, and then all of a sudden I have to leave the house, and she kind of looks at me like, why do I have to go in there? I haven't been in there in a week. So, I'm reminding myself too, as I know I'm having to leave a little bit more often, is like, oh, maybe I should open her door so she can get used to going back in there. Because she used to sleep in there all the time, but now she's not in that room where it is.
Yeah.
So she's not going in it as frequently as she used to. Whereas if I start maybe leaving it open, she'll do that more often again.
So I grew up in a time kennels weren't the thing. So it wasn't something I grew up with, I have to say. Even when I had my boxer, I didn't use kennels. My daughter actually started with Chess, and she did started in a kennel, but then gave that up, and I gave that up. And so, what is the principle to having a dog in a kennel?
You broke up a little bit, but I think I got what you were asking for. Um, so when I had gotten my dog at first,
Uh-huh.
I kennel trained her as a puppy from the get-go as a puppy,
Mhm.
and I had two dogs. Unfortunately, one of them passed this summer, but
Mhm.
we we had kennel trained them, and they knew that their kennels are their safe place.
Uh-huh.
And so when we thought, well, do we really need to have them in their kennels all the time? So we
Uh,
actually left them out one time when we left the house
mm,
and realized that they ended up having more anxiety
mm,
with having free roam of the house than
mm,
they did in their kennels. And
mm,
then as when my son was born, if he like as he's older now, but when he was a toddler, if he was being too hyper or whatever, both dogs would just go in their kennels. They're like,
mm,
this is our safe place. We know we can go in here and we're not going to get bothered and stuff like that. And
mm,
so
mm,
I think for if you train them properly with it, they
mhm.
realize that it's kind of their safe place and they
Okay.
can go in there and just leave the doors open when you're home, and they'll
Mhm.
just go lay in there and they know that they're safe.
Hmm,
And
that's interesting.
it got to a point where even if because I don't wear shoes in the house,
Mhm.
if I put my shoes on, both of my dogs knew that it's time to go in our kennel, mom's leaving. So, it just we started a lot of routines like that, and my dogs just have always showed signs of being much more comfortable with that routine.
Anxiety, it makes sense with anxiety. Do you cover the kennel when you do that, or do you just leave it?
Mm-mm.
No, just leave it the way it is. And
No, I just had the 2 dogs in their kennels right next to each other, and they the funny thing is there when we were as I mentioned, we sold our house and we moved across country, and
uh-huh,
there was a couple times that as we were showing our house that we were selling, we would take their kennels down so that
uh-huh.
the whole house sale thing. But if we accidentally put their kennels up in the wrong place, they would get confused because one was a smaller dog, so her kennel was smaller. And they would be like, the big dog would go in the small kennel and the small dog would go in the big kennel because they were on the wrong side.
Oh,
And it was like, I would just look at them like, you can go in the right size kennel. And it wasn't until I'd switch the kennels around that they'd be like,
oh,
this is where I need to be.
that's funny. I'm sorry to hear you
Yeah,
lost your dog. That's a very hard process to go through.
it was.
My son just had to put their dog to sleep because she was very old and just in pain. And you never get
Yeah.
over that. It's just something you never get over when you lose your
No,
animals. They're very
it's
special.
very hard. She was 13 and she had
Wow.
lost her eyesight and stuff
Oh,
like that. So it was hard,
no.
and it was hard. I mean, right now we're living in a situation where there's 2 other dogs. So my other dog is okay, but we're in the process of buying a house now, and I
Mhm.
don't know how she's going to be on her own. So,
Oh,
so we're definitely in a process of when we move, do we maybe rescue an older dog just so that she has a
oh,
mate?
yeah.
Because I got her when she was a couple months old, and
Oh,
she's always had a companion animal. So
oh,
not sure.
oh, that's a hard choice. Oh,
It is.
well, I have not. I've gone through most of my life with an animal, and I love animals to
Yeah.
death. I just love animals. And so my cat that I had, she was very old, and I called her my monster cat. I had a favorite cat. I've had a couple favorite cats, but the last one before this one was my actually favorite cat. And she ended up
Mhm.
passing away. And I was devastated. It was sudden. I was devastated. So a friend of mine goes, "Go to the
Aw.
pound." So I went to the pound and I found the most crazy cat in the entire place, and I fell in love with this cat. Anyway, she just passed not that long ago. Well, about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm just now finally getting to the point where I'm ready to have a cat again. So I'm working
Yeah.
that way slowly. I'm dragging my feet as I go forward, but I'm working that way.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, because our
Hard.
pets are our family,
They
so
are. Mhm.
I totally
They are.
understand that.
At least for me, and they are good companions. They're really very loving and unconditionally loving. They really
Mhm.
put up with all of our shenanigans that we put up. I mean, they really do. But the one thing
Absolutely.
say is really, they do rely on us. So make sure that you're doing the best you can for them, because they really rely on us to take care of them and make wise choices, just like you would for a
Yeah,
2-year-old. You have to make wise choices for them.
absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely. And to kind of extend on that point is, don't feel like everything you're doing for yourself, whether it's using essential oils, whether it's, whatever complementary health thing that you're exploring for yourself, don't feel like your animal has to have that as well.
exactly. And just like you wouldn't feed a 2-year-old everything, you don't have to do that for your animal too. Because I heard
Exactly. Exactly.
"Oh, my mom feels really bad for this dog." I don't know what the dog's name was, and so she just feeds him all the time. Like,
Oh,
okay. So don't feed your dogs all the time. Do you have
yeah,
any last
exactly.
words or tidbits that you want to leave with people? The golden
Um,
nugget?
the golden nugget. I think what I just said, don't feel like just because you're using stuff for yourself that your dog has to have it for them too,
Mhm,
or cat or whatever, whatever pet it is. Don't
mhm,
feel like, oh, I'm using this herb or I'm using this and it makes me feel great. So maybe it'll make my dog feel great or my cat feel great. Or, just realize that they are an animal,
mhm,
and yes, we are their guardians and we need to take care of them,
mhm,
but they lived in the wild,
mhm,
and before we domesticated them. So just remember that we domesticated them, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of them in a way that's safe for
mhm,
them,
mhm.
not what we want, but for them.
Yes. You
So I
also
think that would be my golden nugget.
you made me think of something when you said that. Because one of the other things that we as people can do is, well, I'm going to try something and it didn't hurt me. So therefore, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try it again. And so, one of the things, as you were saying, that I thought of is, just because you use, like, some essential oil and your dog or cat is not reacting to that, doesn't mean that they're not having a reaction to that. So
Right.
constantly be paying attention to the amount of time that you're using something, or the long-term effects. I just want to point that out one more time, because I just hear in my voice some people say, well, I've been using lavender for 3 years now, and I don't see my animals being affected by that. But you can't really see what's going on internally. You can't really see how they are being affected by that, because some of the more um, less potent essential oils, um, the as you're using it, the ramifications can kind of build up more slowly. So don't think that it's just,
Right.
you're safe.
Well, and here's an interesting thing that I always kind of think about, when, especially just because it started so long ago,
Mhm,
when I I have two boys that are very extreme ages. One's
mhm.
25 and one's 7. Um,
Oh
when
my.
my 25 when my 25-year-old was little, he's the
Yeah.
one that has the allergies to all of the different antibiotics.
Uh-huh.
And when he was little and he had his very first reaction, I I kind of asked the pediatrician, I'm like, he's been on this before, and he had been on it. I think at the time it was amoxicillin.
Mhm,
And at the time he had the reaction, he had been on it for 8 days. And I'm like, why was he able to be on it for so long? And the pediatrician said to me, and this is something that I think about no matter what we're using, is
mhm,
that you can use something every day of your life, and you could be 99 years old, and we'll use the amoxicillin. You could be 99 years old on your 10th day of taking it and have a reaction.
mhm.
It just, your body changes all the time. Our
Right.
animals' bodies change all
Mhm,
the time. So
mhm,
it's just important to remember that every time you're using something for yourself, pay
mhm,
attention to how it feels in your body. Your animal cannot tell you how they feel. So make sure that you understand their body language before you start introducing all sorts of stuff, so that
yeah,
you understand their
mhm.
body language when you're using things. So
And that's a
if
point, yeah.
having a reaction.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Just don't assume. Keep an eye open and watch for them. And I gotta say one more time too is if you are feeding them foods that are box cans, whatever, we're not gonna go down that road. Animals like fresh food. Cats love all different kinds of herbs and lettuces and stuff, and dogs too. But there are certain foods too to be aware of that they can't eat. So also know what foods that are good and not good for your animal, because every breed, every different kind of animal can be affected differently.
Absolutely.
I so appreciate you spending this time with us. Thank you for all of your wisdom. You've been such a fun and great guest to talk about this, I think, very passionate subject for me. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate that I had the opportunity to share, and I definitely am willing to answer any questions if anybody has any. So throw them my way.
I feed my cat spinach. Spinach is good for cats. Spinach isn't bad for cats. Nobody's asked questions.
I don't think so.
They usually are like all kinds of questions, and they're all very quiet. So I think
it's funny. I've done a couple interviews, and nobody has any questions until afterwards, and then all of a sudden people will be like, "Oh, but wait," or whatever. So hopefully, I'm expressing everything clearly, and everybody is getting a good understanding of stuff.
And if you guys haven't, let me know, and I will make sure the question is answered. So if you have any questions, put it in there, and we'll get the answers to your questions after this show as well. I do check everything. And I'm pretty sure spinach is pretty good for cats. I don't think that's a problem. I knew that grapes and onions and things like that, garlic.
Yeah.
Why does my dog eat Lucky Charms? Because you put them on the floor and the dog eats it. That's an easy one. Don't feed your dog Lucky Charms. I don't know. Your dogs are pretty lucky though. So anyway, well, one thing I want to tell you guys, I'm thinking about doing a mediumship gathering for like 10, 15 people, and I'm going to have 3 different mediums. So if you guys are interested in that, get a hold of me. I'm going to fill those spaces. I was going to do it on January 1st evening. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I'm going to do that on January 1st with 2 other mediums. Oils to, well, we did a discussion around oils and cats. What did you want to know, Diana? What specific question did you have around oils and cats? Yes to what? The mediumship thing? There's a delay. Hold on, we got one person about oils. Diffuse. I will reply. Well, we talked about diffusing and cats through this whole recording. Marsha.
I guess we could just reiterate that if you're going to diffuse, make sure your cat can go in a different room.
Yeah, where it can't breathe it in. What I would say is go back and listen to the recording, because really we covered that pretty extensively. So go back and see. You guys are funny now. I'll deal with you, Marsha and Denise, about the mediumship thing later. Okay, thank you so much for being here, and thank you guys all for listening. I hope that kind of answered your question, Diana. So if you have any questions and you listen to this, then please let me know, and I'll get the answer back to you. So I think we covered it pretty thoroughly. Thank you so much, Anna, for being here. I so appreciate it. It was fun. All right, everybody. Have a nice holiday.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome anytime.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.